So I think I'm actually going to take this is about an hour talk, and I'm going to try to squeeze it into a half hour. And so what I'd like to do is to share as much information as possible. I'm going to just give you the half hour talk, and I will be around for the rest of the evening. So if you have questions or want to talk about any of this stuff, please look for me. I'm happy to be chatting with you. mcode.dev is my blog. All of these slides are available online right now at mcode.fyi/GenAI. So this is probably the one slide you might want to take a photo of, but the rest of the slides you don't need to photograph because they're all going to be there on the wonderful wide web. So I'm Marc, by the way. I'm a developer advocate at Google, and like the rest of you, I think, probably all of you, I'm trying to figure out what this stuff is and how to take advantage of it, how to use this artificial intelligence stuff. And the way I learn is by making things. And so I want to walk through my journey building something with this stuff because I learned a lot that way. And I kind of recommend this, especially to young people. Sometimes I get this question, how do I get started in whatever area? And I always say, make something. Just think of something you're intrigued about, something that's really meaningful to you, and try to build it. It doesn't matter if it's super fancy. It doesn't matter if it works. You will learn a lot just going through that process. So how many of you work on weekend projects? Seeing some hands, a bunch of hands. So I do that too. I have this, I always think whatever I'm working on is going to change the world. Everything's going to be different after this app ships. But I think every great invention started out as someone's weekend project. And I had an idea. This is actually an internal Google memo, a piece of a memo I wrote back in, we actually use Google Docs in Google, not surprisingly. And I wrote this doc in 2016 where I was proposing an idea for an app. At the time I was trying to show off something called a progressive web app, which some of you may be familiar with. And I was proposing this idea of an interactive trivia quiz challenge game. And didn't quite get it done. The main reason was sourcing the content turned out to be pretty tricky. And then fast forward to this year, all of this generative AI stuff exploded, and I had this thought, wow, maybe that's where I could source the quiz data from. Wouldn't it be cool to create something that's free and open source? I love trivia quizzes and those kind of challenges, nerdy type things like that, and I just thought, this is perfect. This is what I've wanted. This is the app I've wanted all along. There are apps out there, by the way. You all know some of the names of them that do trivia quizzes. But if you think about it, a lot of them, you have to write the trivia quiz, and then you share it with other people. And if you've ever gone on one of those sites and you search for some shared quiz, the quality is kind of eh. And I thought to myself, wow, in this generative AI world, I can really generate great quality quizzes. We'll see if that's true. So I came up with this app I call Quizaic. It's pronounced like mosaic. Weird name, but I managed to shoehorn AI into it, so I'm happy. Let's actually look at quizaic.com. Believe it or not, it's there. And if you go there, you see these cards. Each card represents a quiz, so you can edit the quizzes. And if you notice that little animation there, I'm using something called Flutter for the UI, which I really like. It gives this kind of mobile-like experience in a web app, which is really nice. And you can also, of course, generate mobile apps with the same framework. But anyway, so you can look at the quiz and you can edit it. Imagine you're a teacher and you want to create a quiz on chemistry for your class to do over the weekend. You generate this quiz and bam, you've got a quiz. You can even say, I want this part of chemistry. I don't know enough about chemistry to say a good example, so I'm just going to say something in chemistry. And you get this really specific quiz for your students, but you might want to edit it. And of course, you can come here and see the output of the quiz, and you can add questions and remove and edit questions and all that kind of stuff. So cool. Let's create a quiz right now. We'll call it test, quiz, very creatively. I have this notion of a generator. A generator is a pluggable quiz creation engine. Some of these are GenAI and some are not. Some of them are static generators. So if you think about, there are some databases of trivia questions, and they're curated, so they're all known to be good, and you might just want to tap into those. So Open Trivia is one example. And when you ask for Open Trivia, you get a pull-down menu for all the different categories that are offered by Open Trivia. But if we choose Google's PaLM model, which is a GenAI generator, quiz generator, that pull-down menu turns into a free-form input field, because there's no list of categories. It's anything you want. So does anybody have a category they'd like for this quiz to be about?
Web development.
Web development, okay. Web development, I'll make it multiple choice. Let's do 3 questions, because we're going to actually run the quiz and I don't want it to take too long. Difficulty intermediate. Now I have to warn you, the model has been giving me some problems with the difficulty level. I've been asking for intermediate and expert, and every once in a while I get a really super easy question. So anyway, we'll see. So it takes a while to generate these quizzes because these GenAI engines are slow. So that was weird. I think I got 2 there. Anyway, what I've done is I've made everything asynchronous, and this is one of the tricks I learned with this stuff, is you don't want to make the user sit there and wait for and say like, I'll be with you any minute, we're just generating a thing. So I give you this asynchronous progress indicator, and I do all this stuff in the background. And by the way, I use AI to generate a little fingernail type image for the quiz, and so you see, I'm going to get rid of this because I think it's broken, but you can see this, I guess that's a quiz image, I don't know. But let's try running it. And when you run a quiz, you have runtime settings for it. You can make it synchronous or asynchronous. An async quiz is like you're giving your students, run this over the weekend and I'm talking too much about the app, so let me keep going. 30 seconds per question, anonymous. So I'm going to let you do the quiz without logging into Google. That's the way it should be. I don't want to get your information unless somebody wants it to be non-anonymous, they can, but I don't want to do that. Let's start hosting. You get a nice QR code, so please take out your phones, and if you're interested, go ahead and visit that website. It should take you to a page that gives you a prompt for your name, and you can give it any handle, any name you want. Yes?
I think you might need to plug in your laptop.
Oh. Thank you. Yeah, I thought this was powered. Maybe it's not.
There's a second one to plug in for power.
Second one. I'm down to what? 10% probably, so not an emergency. But thank you for catching that.
Yeah, there you go. Follow that. That should be powered. Did it get plugged out?
That is plugged in as well. Maybe I'll switch to a different one without breaking the. Is that on?
Yeah, there. Green light.
Okay. Whew, that was close. That was a perfect segue while you all registered for my quiz. So, gee, I wonder how that happened. No, I didn't plan that. Okay, we have 49 people registered. Let's start the quiz. Is everybody ready?
Wait.
Which HTML element is used to create a hyperlink? And I can see I'm keeping track of how many people are responding. The way I'm doing all this real time is with something called Firestore and Firebase, which are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. But it gives me this very nice interactive nature. Waiting for 4 people. And I'm probably going to just go ahead and advance. Let's go ahead and show the results. The leaderboard shows Yusuf E is in first place. Very good. Let's go to the next question. Which CSS property is used to set the width of an element? So this is what I was talking about earlier when I said sometimes you ask for an intermediate question and it does something dumb. Yeah, unless I'm crazy and the answer is not width, this is not a good question. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say this is a bad question. Congratulations to everyone. Josh just jumped into first place. Last question is question 3. Which JavaScript function is used to get the current date and time? Interesting. By the way, there might be no correct answer here, because these things lie a lot. And we're going to talk about what I do to deal with that. 45 people have. Let's see. Now, I just put this in recently. When I go to past the last question, the people in first place, second place, and third place, you're going to get confetti on your phone. So hold up your phone if that happens. Okay, we've got one there. What place did you come in? Second. First place right here. Well done. How about there's a third place finisher here? There we go. Okay, that's Quizaic. And hopefully it's going to be a great tool for both education and fun. But for me, why I'm here to talk about it, it's really been a meta learning experience for me to learn how to use GenAI in a modern app. So end of demo. You may notice when I stop the quiz, it just put you right back to waiting for quiz to start, right? Because one of the things I'm doing in this app, which I think is going to advance the state of the art, is these sessions associated with the host. So I can run another quiz right now, and it'll just jump you right into that next quiz. So if you've ever done Kahoot or something like that, where you have 3 different quizzes, and you have to keep giving the link out every time there's a new quiz. That's not going to happen here. Okay, stop talking about your app, Mark. Okay, back to the slides. This is normally where I go into how I thought about this app, how I conceived the organization, the structure, the componentry, the data model, all that stuff. And I'm not going to talk about that because I don't have time. I think the more important part why you're here is sort of the lessons I learned through this experience. So I'm going to skip a lot of stuff here. How I designed the system, I came up with these personas and a data model, and I came up with rules for how the two interact with each other. The system architecture boiled down to really choosing a UI framework, choosing a web server, choosing a back-end API server, and choosing a storage engine. And this is important. There's an API between the web server and the back end that I've defined to cover all the possible capabilities the app cares about doing and what the restrictions are and the rules of the road and so on. But I want to talk about some of the choices, some of the technology choices I've made. So for the UI, I think I already mentioned I'm using Flutter. I'm new to Flutter. I've only been using it for a couple of months. I found it a real pleasure to use. I found it easy to get started on. It is a Google thing, and one of the things that I think causes people to shy away from it is based on a programming language called Dart. And for many years I was kind of like, no way do I have to learn a new programming language just to write another framework. But I actually found it to be a real joy to work with. I was surprised at how straightforward it was. If you're familiar with C or Java Plus, that lineage of programming languages, it's quite natural, and with some of the code assistance tools we have built into VS Code nowadays, it was actually quite straightforward to learn. But the real win is described here, which is that I now have one code base, and with this same piece of code, I can generate a web app, as I showed you, but I can also generate an iOS mobile app and an Android mobile app. So that worked out well for me. How about the compute? Where do I run the compute? I'm using something called Google Cloud Run. What I love about Cloud Run is this sort of modularity. I put my computing elements, whether it's a web server or an API server, into a Docker container. And I essentially hand the container to Google. And I say, run this for me whenever a request comes in. And one of the big wins for that is scalability. So if I get a lot of demand immediately, like 50 of my best friends suddenly connect to my app, it automatically scales out the capacity. And after that demand goes down, like it is right now, it will reduce the compute instances, so I won't be charged for any more usage than I need. There's lots of other reasons to love Cloud Run, and it's my go-to platform for doing app development work in the cloud nowadays. And it works quite well with AI, generative AI stuff. But I'm not going to say more about that. You can check out Cloud Run or ask me any questions like afterwards. For storage, I'm using something called Firestore. I mentioned this earlier. It's a structured, hierarchical, essentially a JSON document database. So I really like the way it models how I think about the data in my app. So I have like a quiz object, and you can see there's a quizzes collection and then a bunch of objects with all the parameters. So I almost like go straight from my data model to administering this schema, if you will. It's very natural, and it has these very good real-time capabilities where I can say, I'm gonna just wanna listen to like what was happening when I was running that quiz is the app you were running was listening to the sessions object. And every time I clicked next question, it updated this session object, and all of you listeners got notified and advanced it. So it's a really nice mechanism for distributed communication and synchronization. And again, just blowing through here, but hoping to give you ideas of tools that I found really useful and that I like to use in building out these kind of applications. So AI, the reason we're all here. I have this notion of quiz generators. Vertex is Google's cloud AI platform, if you will. So I'm going to show you just something very simple you can do. I think this is called the Generative Language Studio or Generative Studio, AI Studio for Language. I can't even remember the name of it, but I could say something like, create a quiz about web development.
What is that? I don't know where that sound's coming from.
It might have been when we jiggled the cable sound below.
Sorry?
The cable sound below, so
Maybe I'm moving too much. So it gave me, hard to see, sorry, it gave me good, thank you. So I was thinking maybe there's an earthquake or something. It gave me a bunch of questions, but that's not really that usable. I mean, when I first wrote this app, I did it something like this, and then I started doing what we did in the old days. I parsed this. I wrote this thing that would say, you know, this kind of looks like this, and I'll turn it into that. Eventually, I wanted it in JSON, because that's a really convenient way to represent it, and that's also how I store the data. Got this brilliant idea, not that brilliant, pretty obvious, formatted in JSON. And yeah, the app, the LLMs kind of get what you mean. They gave me it in JSON. And then of course I had to fine tune the structure. I wanted the right keys and everything else, but it was a pretty quick iteration to where it was giving me exactly the format I wanted. That could go straight into my app, and I didn't need to do any parsing. But this is a nice interactive sort of playground for experimenting with Google's models. You can select which model you want to play with. When you're happy with it, you can say view code, and it gives you a Python in Colab, gives you a curl interface as well as a Python interface. You can just copy this Python code, and you've got a little app that you can use to run the prompt that you just did. And because you're running it against Google's cloud, it's going to scale, and it's going to have good, reasonably, good performance characteristics, and the model should be very good, and you can select which model you want and so on. So that's what I'm using for the AI part. Let's get into the lessons. We have 6 minutes left. Generally, what I found about this GenAI stuff is it's surprisingly easy to do hard things. And it's surprisingly hard to do easy things, maybe? Consistently do things really well. It's a really disorienting experience. You sometimes feel like you're not coding, you're talking to a baby or a toddler. Yeah, I feel like I'm talking to a toddler sometimes. If I have time, I'll give some examples, but like spell everything out. It's hard to objectively evaluate the output. So I generate these quizzes. Are they any good? How do I know? I'm going to tell you how I know. And when you start playing with this stuff, you start seeing AI everywhere, which is kind of fun, but it's easy to overdo that too. Prompting is a whole world to itself, but I highly recommend everyone learn this new language called English. Hopefully these LLMs will have more support for other languages than English. So what I really mean is learn to program in natural language. manage your prompts like code. So put them in source control and code review them and all this kind of stuff. Prompts and code work better together. So if you know how to program, don't worry about this stuff taking your job. You're going to be in good shape because you're going to know how to harness this stuff in a broader framework. Like everybody's able to make these small demos that look really cool. But how do you put this stuff into a real world product? That's hard. And that still requires humans. Maybe a month from now it won't, but for now it does. And you know, you can leverage what you know, your skills and your expertise to do that. Measure everything. All of a sudden we're in this fuzzy world where we request something and we get a quiz, this fuzzy thing, you know, it's not objective. Is it any good? We can't be in this model where human beings have to look at the output and inspect it. We have to have an engineered way of deciding what the quality of this stuff is. So you need to come up with a metric and a way to measure it. And the goal is, once you have that, then you have a benchmark, and you can see if your model's getting better or worse over time. So how do we do that? My idea was use an LLM to assess the quality of LLM output. You're supposed to laugh at that, because a lot of people, when I told this idea, they looked at me like, okay, Mark, that's great. It sounds a little crazy, right? What could possibly go wrong? But in actuality, it's working, and let me explain how. I have this database I mentioned called Open Trivia, which is essentially a known database of accurate quizzes. So what I do is I take a quiz in that data set, who was the first president, and I decompose it into 4 assertions. Each of the 3 wrong answers, I say, this question and answer is false. And the 1 right answer, I say, this question and answer pair is true. And then I run into an LLM, and I say, in 1 word, and only 1 word, remember the toddler, I'm talking to a toddler here, are the following assertions true or false? And it gives me this nice false, false, true, false. And I can batch these up in big bundles, right? So I do that, and I can take the corpus and I can run it through the LLM and evaluate it. If it was useless, if it was totally non-working, I would get 50% accuracy, right? I'm getting 70% accuracy, and I'm very close to a big jump to 90%, which I haven't totally verified yet, but I'm getting very good results. Why is 70% good? Is that good? Well, it turns out because of Bayes' law, it's quite useful. So I was going to take, how many people here have heard of Bayes' theorem? Okay, that's great. I don't have time to go into this example. Well, let me just say it really quick. You go to a doctor and the doctor does a test that's 99% reliable. Meaning, if you have this condition, there's a 99% chance if it says you're positive, if you have the condition and you take the test, there's a 99% chance it's going to show positive. If you don't have it, there's a 99% chance it's going to say you're negative. So it's 99% accuracy, right? 1% of the world has this. You go to the doctor and the test says positive, you're positive. What are the chances you have this condition? Just guess. What was that?
50-50, 10%.
I couldn't catch that.
50-50.
50-50, that's right. It sounds like it should be you're in trouble, but it's actually 50-50. And that's Bayes' law in a nutshell. I'm going to let you look at this slide because I can't explain it. I'm just waving my hands wildly. But it turns out because the population is so small of the people who actually have it, even though this test is positive, you're equally likely to be a false positive as to be a true positive. What does that mean? Why am I talking about that with 46 seconds left? Because I can use that to my advantage. So if you have a tool that has 70% reliability at assessing the accuracy of some output from an LLM, you can, that's the blue line, the blue dotted line here. If it tells you it's positive and the underlying population is, let's say, about the same, 70%, you're actually in the 80th percentile confidence level. So it gives you this boost that you can use to know what the probability is that your assertions are actually correct. All right, that was way too much time on Bayes' rule, but the idea here is I can generate my quizzes, I can run them through this validator, And the validator is going to say there's a 87% chance this quiz is accurate, or there's a 53% chance there's an inaccuracy in one of these 4 responses. And now I can show a confidence measure. It's never going to be perfect, like I'm going to say this quiz is perfect, you can count on it. It's going to be a probabilistic game, so I'll say this quiz looks pretty reliable, or this quiz looks meh, or don't even try this quiz. So that's what I'm going for. I'm also working on a process where I can ask an LLM, what's wrong with this quiz? What's objectionable about this quiz? What do you find doesn't seem good? And it might say something like, question 2 is repetitive, or like we saw earlier, you're giving away the answer in the question. How do you grade those? I started going down the road of building a machine learning model to infinite trivia. In conclusion, I went from something that was an idea that was 7 years old to a prototype in 7 weeks. How did I suddenly get that productive? Well, I think it's a big part of it's this revolution we're seeing in technology. But another part of it is what I think of as my new power toolkit, which is Cloud Run plus Vertex AI plus Firestore plus Flutter. Those 4 together, I feel like I can do anything with, which is really kind of exciting and empowering. Yeah, I get so excited about it, I made this cheesy framework name I call Riff, the Riff framework. So that's it. As I said, I'll be happy. I don't want to take any more time because I'm already over, but I'll be...
You've got 5 minutes questions.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, I got trapped by that too.
In the app you have expertise level. How does the model judge what's easy, medium, experts?
Yeah, so the question was, how does the model deal with expertise level or difficulty level? There's actually something that I struggled with a lot, because no matter what I did, I was finding it wasn't working. I would change the prompt, I would, do all sorts of gyrations, and it wasn't effective. And I just recently discovered something. The model I'm using, the current Palm 2 Google model, just does not seem to get this concept. I tried ChatGPT, and I tried Llama, which is Meta's open source model. They seem to handle it just fine. So I feel like I've been beating myself up, like what am I doing wrong with my prompting? And actually I think the model has a deficiency in that respect. So that's another part of the story here, is like, try different models before you think you're doing it wrong. Yep.
Just a suggestion. If you ever manage to make the quiz really, really hard, it would be nice that each answer has an explanation attached to them explaining why they're wrong.
Yeah, that's a great idea. The question was, could you have, for really hard questions, you might want to have an explanation for why the answer is correct, and that gets back to some of the stuff that Phil was talking about with retrieval, augmented search, and stuff like that. In fact, any question, not just real hard ones, but any question should have that, and it should be in a link, right? Like you don't want to clutter the UI with that stuff, but like when you're playing the quiz, there should be a link like find out more, or find out why A is true and the rest of them are wrong.
It also feels like if you're asking it to generate the explanation at the same time, you give more accurate result for the answers.
Say that again, sorry.
if you're asking me to generate explanations for each answer at the same time, the answer it gives might be more accurate.
Right, that's right. I found that to be the case with my evaluation. So I started evaluating by saying, here's a quiz, what do you think? And then I got into this model of breaking it down into 4 assertions, because my conclusion was that LLMs do better when they have more constrained tasks. So is this true or false, this one statement? It's easier for it to wrap its head around, it seems to be, than is this quiz with 10 questions, or even is this question with 4 options good or bad or wrong or right? It's better to break things down into pieces. But anyway, I think there was another. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, did you try using like I think was it Jeopardy or something, the open trivia, the database as context to like draw questions from?
Yeah.
To use some sort of RAG system to feed in the context.
Yeah, I won't bring up the demo, but the demo has, in addition to Open Trivia, it has Jeopardy. You won't see it. I'm only showing Jeopardy if you're an admin, and that's because of IT reasons. I haven't been able to completely convince myself that it's okay to use that intellectual property.
Yeah,
But-
so the question was like, so if you ask Palm, if you select Palm instead of Open Trivia or the other options,
Yeah.
Palm just generates like 10 questions.
Right.
But did you try feeding in different quiz databases
Yes.
or anything?
Yeah. I've done some prompting where I randomly select questions from Open Trivia and put them into the prompt. It didn't seem to help as far as I could tell. But one thing I'm doing in that regard is I'm trying to make some statement about the quality of quizzes. So not just the accuracy, like this is telling the truth or not, but like is this a good quiz? And what does a good quiz mean? And so what I've been doing is I've been taking 1,000 questions from Open Trivia and embedding them. And now I've got these vectors that somehow embody good quizness. And I'm hoping to be able to take the output of the generator and embed it and find the distance to the good quizzes.
Recording
But
in
the problem is
progress.
the quizzes vary in a lot of different dimensions, so I have to figure out which dimensions are capturing quality versus subject matter and complexity and all these other variables. So. Yep.
Yeah. How does it do with math? Because I've tried questions, math questions on these LLMs. They sound very confident, but they're quite
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I've done a math question because if you give it the topic math, it's going to generate trivia questions about
Oh,
math,
right, okay.
right? So
Yeah.
I don't think it's so good at solving math problems, but I
Okay.
think it's pretty good at posing math questions,
Oh yeah.
if you will.
Okay.
But you can go to that site and generate a math thing. My email is mco@google.com, mco@google.com. So if you
Okay.
find a problem with it or idea or whatever, please let me know.
Okay. Thank you.